Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today, I've just been to Florida, and now I'm in Illinois, all virtually via Zoom, of course, with Maria. Maria's the CEO of Greenlight Family Services. She's a clinician, so she's a clinical social worker. Welcome to the show, Maria. Lovely to see you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and I wish I were down in Florida right now. We got some rough weather here in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, in the north of England, it's very cloudy today.
Cloudy here as well. I'd rather have the sunshine.
Yeah. But you've just been saying that you're going to Greece, so you're looking forward to. And I've just come back. So.
Well, you know what? I'll take all your notes.
Yeah. So you were saying before we started recording that as a clinician, parents come to you, adopted parents come to you when things haven't gone so well, right? So I think that's a perfect kind of jumping off point to explore some of the learnings that you've had, hopefully to help the adopted parents who are listening avoid some of the stuff that's gone that you've seen go pear-shaped, as we call it. Do you know what pear-shaped means? Is that a British thing?
Yes, but
yeah, pear-shaped means they've gone a bit off kilter. It hasn't worked to plan, right? So I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it's some Cockney rhyming slang, but I don't know why. I'm 200 miles north of London, so why I would be talking Cockney rhyming slang. Anyway, so hopefully we can help head off some issues, prevent some issues not happening for some of the listeners, and also we can shed some light on how to deal with some tricky stuff that you've learned over the years of supporting parents. So.
Well, let me start, Simon, by explaining to the listeners that I come to this work from a little different angle. I am running a nonprofit called the Greenlight Family Services. We run out of Chicago, but we have another office in Springfield, which is, we call that the Navel of Illinois, right smack in the middle. It's our capital. So we have an office downstate as well. One of our big programs is managing the Heart Gallery here in Illinois, where we have children listed who are available for adoption. So my professional work, at least in this area, has been mostly matching older youth. So these are the kids who are likely between 8 and 18, matching them hopefully with forever homes. And as one would suspect, these are kids who have had numerous traumas. They might be special needs, hard to place children that kind of land on the Heart Gallery, which I understand your listeners may have just heard about that from a woman who, geez, God love her, right? We need many, many people like that. So that's the angle from which I come. And in my spare time, I am a clinician, meaning I have a private practice here in the area. So I see people privately, many of whom, because I do this work, I do some adoption work, many of whom come to me when either their marriage is having some difficulty after adoption, or even before adoption, or they're having some struggles with the kids. And then what does that mean? So I don't know if you want to narrow that down a little bit, Simon, or?
Yeah. Well, why don't we go for the looking at the marital issues after adoption, because that's an area that I've not looked at, and it pinged for me because when I was a teenager, one of my friends, her brother got knocked down and killed literally outside our house. And obviously a terrible thing for anybody to go through. Unfortunately, her mother and father separated. The marriage didn't stand it. So these kind of shocks, and I've seen other stuff actually. Another part of my life where a family imploded after a tragedy, after being seemingly so strong, they imploded, and the brothers fell out. They started using the grandkids in the war against the grandparents, and it became so. Yeah, marriage can be, it's going to test. It tests this trauma. Tests.
Because if we think about a marriage. Well, we'll talk about the marriage without children. So the kind of traditional two people coming together without children. And when you have children, it's all about the kids. How often do we hear, I don't see my spouse anymore. We're so busy. It's all about soccer practice and running around and the kids sleeping in our bed and, one thing or another, which to your point of having a tragedy like a death, if you're not taking care of that relationship all along, very, very high incidences of implosion, as you mentioned, not uncommon, especially after a death or a horrible trauma where parents they can't cope. I would take a educated guess here that if you don't take care of that relationship all along, and what is it? It's being where the other is in times of trauma and being with that person. So for example, in situations of adoption, not uncommon for one parent to be a little more enthusiastic about adoption than the other. Not uncommon. Doesn't mean they don't want it. Doesn't mean it's not, they're not in, so to speak, but it's not uncommon. Also with, again, that relationship, you're entering a third person. So there's a little small j jealousy that happens among the parents. If the child gravitates to one parent over the other, that can be very underlying, and if it's not attended to, it can be a disaster. Case in point, I had a couple sitting in front of me, and this was actually two women who adopted their daughter, and the one said, you're not keeping your end of the bargain, and you're not doing your chores around the house, and just kind of this nagging at her, nagging. And the other one's like, what is going on here? This just doesn't seem like you. And then she started to cry, and I said, okay, hold on here. Let's just peel off just that, what's coming to the surface. Let's peel that off. Look down in there. What is it all about? Burst into tears. I feel like, Sally loves you more than me, and just dissolved into tears. And she says, oh, this is so stupid. I know she doesn't, but this is just what it feels like. And we're in this together. And she, on and on and on. So thankfully the spouse was able to hear that, not belittle that, not tease her about it, and take it seriously. And she said, I know this sounds childish. I know this sounds silly. And I was there to say, this is not silly at all. This is another person in your relationship that's put everything on its head. It doesn't mean it's a horrible thing. It's a lovely, wonderful thing. And they couldn't have been more in love with this kid. And that was not the worry, but that is not an uncommon situation where one parent may feel that they're not doing it right, or the other parent is better, quote unquote, with the kid. Now remember, I'm talking about the older child who is placed and adopted with a family. Sometimes these situations, and sometimes it's a single parent, and that's a whole other situation. But in a marriage, in a relationship, everything gets thrown on its ear, and it's not uncommon for things to unearth. So had I not dug just a little bit deeper, we would have spent our session talking about what rules in the, what are you supposed to be doing and what are you falling short on? But it really wasn't about that. No. It was just about this feeling that she had. So not uncommon.
Not uncommon. And the interesting thing that leapt out for me from that is that the mom who was having this jealousy stuff was belittling her own emotions.
Yes.
So she was almost like, we talk about kids trying to squash emotions, put a lid on emotions and bottle it up and how unhealthy that is and da 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 da. But we as adults do exactly the same thing. So there's for me, there's why it jumps out to me is, like I used to worry about worrying. So I started off worrying, and then I'd worry about worrying.
Right.
And that would snowball. So it would be.
Well, that's the what if, right? The worry
Yeah.
is what if, which also comes up in couples. That's a great segue. What if we don't know? And this is, the pre-placement kind of consultation. What if we don't know what to do? What if they don't like us? What if? And the what if is the worry. And I said, look, if worrying answered your questions, I'd say start worrying and don't stop until they're 21 years old. That would be great for all of us. Worrying is it's spitting in the wind. It's just going to come right back at you. So we have to be confident as parents, not to say, I know everything, I'm going to handle everything, but instead say, we together have the tools that we're going to do the best we can with what we have at that moment to make good decisions for our child, our relationship, our family in general. And it's hard because what comes up often, Simon, is it becomes a little bit of a stretching of the boundary when a parent clicks into, oh, but the poor kid. Oh, but what a rough life my 2-year-old, if that child is 2 when they're placed, or even infancy, quite frankly. We see it with birth children. I'm a working mom, and I don't see my child enough. So I'm gonna go ahead and let that bedtime stretch a little more. So we see those boundaries get stretched. And what I will ask your listeners to really think about is the kids crave structure and boundaries. They may not act like it all the time, but kids need something to bump into. They need to know the limit. They need to know that they're going to get to go here. Nobody can see me, but you know, they get to go right here and no further. And if either of the parents or family or teachers or whomever allows that child to do that because of recalling their history, feeling quote unquote sorry for the kid, whatever the case may be, trust me, it is not doing any favors for that youth at all. In fact, we see much more anxiety because the kids don't trust the world. You're telling me I have to be, for example, I can't go out after this time, and then you're letting me go out, or what does that mean? That creates this very fluid boundary with it, which is not a great idea, especially when they become teenagers and you need it even more. I mean, talking a little bit of shop, what that is developing a superego. So it's saying, the child is saying, uh-oh, I better not break that rule because mom or dad will not like that. They will be disappointed in me. I don't want that. That's superego. That's that also some mirroring that happens. So we see that with children where they run up to their parents. We all did it. Run up to your parents. Am I the greatest? And the parent says, yes, you are the greatest. Now, you're not using those words, but usually we see it with our young kids. Watch me, watch. That's how it comes out. Mom, dad, watch this. And they, you know, jump across the grass and you say, yay, wow, that was terrific. So what is that doing? That's developing the kids' part of the brain where their superego develops, like, I'm getting validated, I'm being seen, and I'm being told that I'm doing a good job. So then when the parent has to put that boundary, the kid thinks, uh-oh, I don't want mom or dad and dad or mom or grandmother, whomever. I don't want to disappoint. So I'm not going to break that rule. So if that rule becomes fluid all of a sudden, it just brain development wise, it doesn't work. I don't know if I've described that well, but
are you talking about the kid getting confused?
I'm sorry?
Are you talking about the kid getting confused?
Getting confused, absolutely. And it's not even, and you're not going to see it, they're going to feel it. They're not going to be confused if you let them stay up late. That's not confusing to them on the surface, but child development wise, it gets very confusing because of the boundaries that become very fluid. An example, Simon, was working with a young man who was adopted. It was he was probably 17, 18 years old when I met him. He was adopted when he was 12. So he had, 12 years of brain experience, really. Very traumatic situation. He has memory of his experiences. So he had a really hard time coming into a family as a 12-year-old. But these parents really towed the line with him, meaning they kept their boundaries with love. They let him bump into that boundary where he had no boundaries. This kid was running the streets. He was making bad decisions. He was really headed for a disaster. And one of the things he said that I'll never forget, which was so poignant, he said, I finally had someone in my life that I could disappoint, and I didn't want to disappoint them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it is poignant moment that, yeah, I was just thinking about me and my dad and that. Yeah. I want to take, because I forgot to ask you something that when we were talking about kind of the partner stuff. So you said I was just looking at the notes I'd scribbled down. Being there where the other is, and that to me kind of sounds like empathy. So I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, it's very astute. It's almost 100% empathetic, that with all of us, forget about parenting, but how often do we come into situations where a friend or a family member says, complains about something? And how often do we want to say, ugh, it's ridiculous. Don't worry about that. Just, that doesn't help. That's not helpful. If I want to complain about something, I want you to meet me where I am. I want you to empathize with me and say, wow. Now, on our inside voice, we say, I'm not sure why you're so upset about it, but we don't say that out loud. We simply say to our friends or family, boy, that's really hard. That must be so frustrating for you. Just like with my couple that I mentioned earlier, I helped the spouse that was just feeling like her partner was just being bitchy and whiny, and right. I said, you have to understand where she's coming from. So just a reframe. Let's hear it. Do some active listening. What did you hear her say? You can't correct it. When she said, I hear her saying that she feels maybe left out, and that, Sally is taking her place. Okay, good. So you're empathizing with your spouse, with your child. When kids complain about things, we shouldn't have to jump into fix-it mode.
Yeah.
Wow, that must be scary. You must feel anxious about that. That's hard to do. Just like over the weekend, I was with my sister's granddaughter, who is almost 5 years old. And I want to go to the park. Now, we have ways we can parent that situation. I'm not her parent, but I could have dropped what I was doing and said, okay, let's go to the park. Or I said, I know it's so hard. It's so hard to want something so bad and you don't get to do it. That's really hard. But you know what? Let's have you play over here for a little bit. I wasn't going to give in, and it was breaking my heart, right? That this poor kid, and she's so cute, and the big old tears coming down. But how often, and back kind of tying this all up now with feeling like we want to fix it or take care of our adopted kids in a way to right the wrongs of their childhood. How many people would say, oh geez, it's just the park. So what? I can wait. Dinner can wait 30 minutes. Let's go to the park. And I would recommend stick to your guns, empathize. Say it must be so hard to be told no. I understand.
Yeah. So there's a thread there about belittling. The mom was belittling her own thought that it sounds silly. And also what you're not doing in the conversation with your grand niece, is that the right?
Yeah, well, let's see. I guess I would be well, I don't know what I am there. My sister's granddaughter? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm
okay.
Aunt Maria, so.
Aunt Maria, okay. Yeah, so you're a great aunt, aren't you?
Yeah. I suppose, yeah.
Yeah. So, but what you didn't do is belittle what she said. And I've used this a few times, this little story and it's one from my mum, because it's really out of character. It was really out of character for her. So I ran across I got knocked down when I was a kid, not run over, just knocked down by a car that was doing like 5 miles an hour. I hit the blacktop, what you call blacktop, what we call tarmac, and I remember a bottle of soda. You call it soda, we would call it pop. Went shooting out of my pocket, right? And I dropped some sweets as well, I think. But you know, I had a little bit of a bruise, but no problem. Anyway, when I got home, I said to Mum, "Oh, Mum, I got knocked down. I ran in front of this van," and she was like, why did you do that? What a stupid thing to do, you know? And I remember thinking at the time, I didn't do it on purpose. You know that, and it was so out of character that it sticks for my mum, because she's not like that at all. It kind of sticks with me 45 years later, and it's almost like it's a moment of lack of empathy. You know, like I don't. Yeah, it sticks out, but it's not like a bruise on me. It's kind of the exception to the rule. You know, like, you know that the rule is true, but there's always an exception to the rule. So you kind of like, I know that my mum's on my side. I know that mum's on the other side, but that instance when I didn't feel she was, kind of sticks out. But if we are not being empathetic with our partner or with our child as a rule, then that's gonna kind of build up, isn't it? And it's gonna start to cause friction.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's really hard. That's why parents, I would recommend first year or two after adoption, have a clinician to talk to, even just once a month, just to check in for those reasons. And the memory of that for you was kind of like an imprint memory. It stuck, because like I was talking about, that you're running up saying, "Oh my God, this happened to me." And instead of saying, "Oh," scoop you up and, "Oh my God, my poor babe," it was, "Well, what did you do that for?" Which is like an insult on the brain. That's why it sticks. So when we think about adopting an older kid, they've got these imprint memories everywhere that these triggers will happen. Had you been a youth that had a history of those experiences, you would have responded quite differently. You might have screamed back, told her to go pound sand somewhere. You might have acted up. You might have punched your sister. I mean, there's all kinds of things. And then that gives the parent more reason to be critical or to be reprimanding, which we understand. You have a kid acting out, but if we would have met them with that empathy initially, that kids need to be scooped up and loved up and then talked to, like, "Well, how did that happen?" "Well, I ran across the street." "Okay, honey, we talked about that. We can't run across the street. I don't want you to get hurt. You know, let's tend to your bruises. Let me kiss the owie," kind of thing, you know. But it's a good example of how reactions of parents make a big difference.
Yeah. You the other thing that occurred to me as you were talking about your great niece, if that's what she is, or your grandniece, there was an empathy, and then there was a bit of a turnaround. I don't know if you would call it a turnaround. A redirect, yeah, a redirect.
Right, a redirection that is really helpful with kids that I was not going to engage in a power struggle with her because both of us would lose.
Yeah.
That would have been a disaster. I'm not arguing with a 5-year-old kid about wanting to go to the park. That would be, I may as well just, smack my head against the wall. So I say, oh, it's so hard. I know, you're, my sister is called Yaya, which is the Greek grandmother, right? Yaya sometimes wants to do things and she can't do them, and it's really hard. So how about you go play with your Barbies and this and that, and let's get off of it. We're not going to engage in a power struggle, and that's really what it would be.
Yeah.
You're not going to win, and you're going to feel bad winning.
Because I something's popping into my head about a lesson I learned a while ago, and it's not formulating mega clearly, but I'll just give it a go. So, we come across, it's a metaphor, right? So we come across somebody in the hole, that's in a hole, and we can either go down and join them in the hole,
right,
which is like sympathy, or we can meet them where they're at, see them in the hole, and then help them get out of the hole, which is like an empathy and a redirect would seem to be. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, that's been a little bit of the theme of our conversation, is whether you're meeting the child where they are, or your spouse, or another one of your kids, or a neighbor, whomever, meet them where they are. You might not understand it. You might not agree with it. You may want to say, knock it off. You're not going to the park, and that's it. I'm not saying that there's not room for that in life. There is, like, enough talking. Let's, we're done. We're done talking about this kind of thing. But it's to meet them, acknowledge it, and we're going to move on. We're moving on from this.
Yeah.
And it gives you a little snapshot of how they think or where they think. And I had to think about, she's an only child. She pretty much gets what she wants. And it was true. It's really hard when somebody says no. And
Yeah.
if everybody said yes to her for the rest of her life, that would be a disaster.
Yeah. One of the things that comes up a lot in my conversations with adoptive parents, and also when I kind of like read around the subject, is this notion that traditional in inverted commas, I used to really hate people that did the inverted commas in the air. Traditional in inverted commas parenting doesn't work with adoptive kids. And the example that's always given that I hear is the carrot and the stick, the consequences. So the stick is the consequence. The stick is the consequence, and the carrot is the incentive. And that's often kind of wheeled out. I hear that. I kind of hear that a lot. How does that rub alongside your kind of boundaries stuff?
The one thing that I consistently help parents with their kids, consistently help them with this notion of allowing the kids to make a good decision. For example, which is a boundary. It's not engaging in a power struggle. For example, the 6-year-old. We have a snack on in the living room, and the plate sitting there. Said, "Oh, pick your plate up." "No, I don't want to pick my plate up." "Okay, well, let's see. You have until the big hand gets on the 12 to put your plate in the garbage. So you can do it now, you can do it right at the end, but that's how much time you have. Talking just like this. And sure enough, she will wait until 10 seconds before the big hand gets to the 12, stand with the plate, and then drop it in the. So we gave, families give kids an opportunity to make a good decision. And if you choose not to do it, it's not me. If you choose not to do it, oh, well, then you're going to have to, sit in timeout for 5 minutes. Well, you decide. It's fine. I'm going to do something else. And don't give any airtime. It's not worth it. That's what the younger kids, put them in a position to make a good decision. With teenagers, it's almost foolproof to say to the teenager, you need to be home by 9 o'clock. And if you're not home by 9 o'clock, I'll be at the door and you're going to give me your cell phone for 24 hours. No question. I'm not going to yell about it. This is the rule. I'll be standing there and that's going to be it. I don't want to hear that, somebody's car was stolen. I don't want to hear that somebody had to be rushed to the hospital. I don't want to hear it. The fact of the matter is, if you are not in the door by 9, you get to, you're going to give me your cell phone for 24 hours. Simon, that happens one time. And the kids have a breakdown. The parent stands there at the door and they put that phone in there and they get it back in 24 hours. And guess what? When they're out with friends or at a game or playing or whatever the heck they're doing, they say, uh-oh, it's almost 9 o'clock. I got to go.
Yeah.
They don't mess around. I need to make a good decision. So we're teaching kids responsibility and following through with behavior. And there's no arguing. I'm not going to scream at you. You got the consequence right then and there. And they know it in advance. What I see happen, which I understand, parents feel stuck and angry, and the kid hits their brother and causes some injury. That's it. You're not going to the party next week. And that erupts. I mean, that's it. Now, should kids be disciplined for behavior that you don't like? Of course. But if hitting has been a problem, say, you know what? If you hit your sister, you make a decision now. You hit your sister one more time, you're going to have to sit in timeout for 10 minutes. And I'll set the timer for you and I'll stand with you, just so you know. And if it happens, say, oh, boy, that was a bad decision you made. You did this to yourself. I didn't do it. I didn't hit her. So it's putting all the rules out there in advance and put them in a position to make a good decision. Just like whether it's a plate on a table or giving them kind of, we're turning the phones off at 10, or the tablet or the computer or whatever. We're going to turn them off at 10. I'll give you a 10-minute. You got 10 more minutes. And if I see it on at 10:01, you're not going to have it. You're going to have it for 24 hours. If they're older, 24 hours. Guess what? It works.
Yeah.
And they learn, again, it's brain development. You know that we are consistently pruning the brain. That's what they call it, pruning, until kids are 23 years old, young adults, that your brain isn't completely set until 23. We're still learning things. And if you think about your own life, your own experience, around 23 is when you kind of shape up a little bit. You're kind of done being impulsive, and we hope, although plenty of people keep going, but those messages can continue for kids, and put them in a spot to make a good decision.
Yeah. So there's obviously, there is a power differential here, or authority differential, whatever it is. What have you got to say about the husband and spouse, or mom and mom, dad and dad, in terms of that kind of?
Well, that's part of the recommendation to see a clinician while you're parenting. You have to be on the same page. Kids will try to split. I say no, go ask mom.
I used to do that.
Of course. You ask mom because she's going to say yes. You ask dad because he's going to say yes, or whatever. Dad said it was okay if it's okay with you. And then you look like the bad guy. Parents can't set themselves up. They have to be on the same page. And if they are on the same page, there's just about, the kid won't even try. They'll try but once.
Yeah.
And really, kids learn very quickly.
So the therapist clinician is going to help you see the stuff that you can't see and make the unknowns known. And it's really stuck with me. And I heard it must be 10 years ago. It's hard to see the picture when we're in the frame.
Yep.
So that third
and
part helps us.
Decisions about parenting, decisions about rules. If your spouse is not in agreement with a 9 o'clock curfew, then what would they agree to? 8:30? Maybe we try it. What are you worried about? You're worried that he or she is not going to make good choices, or what is it? Well, your dad is worried. So we're going to start at 8 o'clock, and if you continue to make good decisions, you're going to get to stay out till 8:30. After 5 tries of you coming in at 8, and put X's on a calendar or whatever. So the kids work towards something. And it's also saying, we are together. Your dad and I are in agreement with this choice. And failing that with any kids, with any parents, and it's hard. Everybody's got jobs, and likely both parents are working, and you've got practices and this and that and the other, and you don't have time for each other. It's really important to take that time, especially with rules of the house. Mom and dad don't get to yell at each other either, hopefully.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. But and to say to kids, sometimes mom and dad have disagreements, but we still love each other, and we're still going to be your parents, and whatever. I mean, whatever the kids may be worried.
So to sum up the last segment, then really, you're talking about rules in advance, talking about clarity, talking about agreement, and to a certain extent, I think you're talking about simplicity as well, like straightforwardness.
It's a great summary. I think it's much easier said than done.
Yeah.
We know that, parenting is one of the hardest things anybody can ever do.
Yeah.
And there's no rule book. There's no guide. You're going to, and back to our beginning of the conversation is, we're going to do the best we can each day with what we have. And we're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen, and we're going to figure it out together. Maybe it's a family meeting, or, giving kids some airtime, to speak about what might be troubling them or whatever. So all those recommendations, all the things that we've talked about, again, I think parenting is difficult. Parenting an adopted child after they've been had experienced significant trauma And even if the message is, oh, they only had one placement and you're still getting that child when they're 5, it's traumatic. It's trauma. Even just not being with their biologic family. But I mean, I think if we can walk away today and connect with our spouse, even if it's not a love relationship, even if you're raising your kids with your sister or your parents or whomever is helping in a caretaking way. I did my Ph.D. work on grandparents raising grandchildren, and they stumble upon this tenfold because grandparents are supposed to just spoil them and give them back to the parents. Now they have to have rules. Now they can't be grandma that, the kids get everything they want, which is a whole different discussion. And many of your listeners may be relatives raising relatives. And the thoughts about your relative who wasn't able to parent for whatever reason. Maybe they're deceased, maybe they're having drugs or alcohol problems, maybe they're incarcerated or deployed or whatever the situation. They're not able to take care of their kids. Our own feelings about that. I don't want to ignore our relatives raising relatives for whatever reason.
Sounds like that would be another great follow-up interview to have in a few months' time when your diary allows you.
Yeah, that's a whole group in and of itself. I haven't checked the 2020 census, but 2010 census in the United States, there was 1 out of 10 families were being raised by a relative. A huge number of, I think it was 9-point-some% of families across the United States. Be curious what it is. Where you live. It's not uncommon, whether it's immigration issues or drugs and alcohol is just rampant and horrible, incarceration, those kinds of things. But, and again, I need to check 2020, but that's what Greenlight Family Services helps families when they are in a situation where they need to legally adopt a relative. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So I would encourage anybody in Illinois, take a look at our website. It's greenlightfamilyservices.org, one word. And there's videos on there, and you'll see what I look like, I guess. It's nobody. People have a picture, and then they, it's always interesting. But if we can help in any way, we are a nonprofit. We work on a sliding scale for all families. If you're involved with state services, we got a contract, so those services are all free. And I'm glad to be part of the discussion.
Thank you, Maria. And as always, listeners, links and some background is in the show notes, and a link to Maria's website if you didn't get that down in time. Maybe I often listen to podcasts while I'm walking the dog or driving, and you think, oh, how on earth can I remember that? So you don't need to remember it, listeners. Check out the show notes we'll put in. And brilliant. I really enjoyed the discussion, and hopefully it's brought a lot of new things to my attention, and hope it's helped you too, listeners. Thank you very much, Maria.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm glad we're talking about it, and good luck to you. I hope you do this for a very, very long time.
Thank you, Maria. Thanks, listeners, and we'll speak to you very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.